Okay, today is Thursday, March 20-something, whatever the day is, doesn't matter. It's a Thursday night in Malden, and we're looking at electric. I'm in the parking lot of the BB school, and I'm looking at all sorts of interesting things here. And one of the interesting things they have is a zero-emission electric bus. All electric somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a quick look inside. Let's see what the inside of an electric bus looks like. Holy cow! Guess what? It looks like a bus. Interesting. More interesting stuff. Electric buses. Let's go take a look and see what else there is to see about this new world of electronic gizmos and electronic transportation. Look at that. When life gives you lines, ride them. It's like interesting Lime bike equipment. Plus, I believe it's an electric scooter. Interesting. Very interesting. What are these?
And so,
interesting car sharing opportunities.
You can go inside if you want.
The what?
You can go inside if you want.
No, it's okay. Is it all electric?
It's electric, yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's take a look at some of these other ones.
You can fit three.
3 people in that one. Wow. And look at this.
What a cookie!
No. I'm here to see all these fancy new electric vehicles.
Have you gone into the bus?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
are you handing out cookies?
there's no solar panels on our car.
Joe, you're always with the camera. You're getting like Sal.
Sorry.
People see it.
Is that another electric car?
Yeah.
Wow, let's see.
This one's solar. Well, yeah, I guess it's solar.
Cool.
I like your pants.
Electric hybrid motor there.
Are you wearing them because it's the second day of spring?
You say this one's solar?
I think it's a solar company. I don't
Oh,
think
solar company. Oh.
They might charge it based on,
You just put the hood up.
but there's no solar panel on the car.
Help you celebrate.
Powered by sunshine.
Do you need Mama to hold them?
Interesting.
Yeah, sunglasses over.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I did make a handwritten. I did it last night. Yeah. And
You know,
plenty more. I gotta bring.
They're actually getting so much.
I've got a dumb question. I wonder if they make these new solar cars in a stick shift.
I don't know. Maybe it'll become more desirable.
No, there's no shifter.
Yeah, I know. I'm being silly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Interesting. Okay, let's get it right this time. Thursday, March 21st, inside the First Baptist Church, Malden Talks. We're about to discuss the sustainability initiative here in Malden, and it's going to be interesting.
Hello everyone, welcome so much to First Parish in Malden. I'm the Reverend Dr. O'Connor. This is the church, this is my church, and sustainable transportation and sustainability is a really important value of us here at First Parish in Malden. So we were so happy to provide this space for this event. So thank you so much, Councilor, and let's get on our way.
Thank you so much, Reverend. We really appreciate it. The First Parish in Malden is a really critical part of working towards our Malden's future, and great to have you. And there's been so much great energy. So really My name is Malden City Councilor Steve Winslow, and I really appreciate you all coming out tonight to hear about this sustainable transportation in Malden. So it's something that I think, as you know, my wife and I, Ellen, have been working on biking in Malden and the Bike to the Sea Trail, and it's been really near and dear to our hearts. But we know in Malden that traffic and transportation issues are something of a constant discussion, but we never seem to make a lot of forward progress on it. And I think the other challenge is there's a lot of changes happening in our world. You see from the e-vehicle fair, there's a whole lot of different options now that are being offered to communities in terms of their transportation future. And we as a community have to get prepared for that. We also have to do our share in terms of addressing climate change and being a sustainable community. We are a coastal community. I remember, I think over 10 years ago, with Bike to the Sea, we were here talking about climate change and how Malden, if we don't do enough, a good third of Malden could end up in underwater in 20 or 30 years. So this is all important work in terms of getting around the city, in terms of becoming a sustainable community. So I appreciate everybody coming out here. So I just wanted to, one of the themes. So just go over the agenda a little bit. There we go. I have a plain slide in there. So we're going to do have a keynote speaker tonight, and then do some shorter talks about some things, and then in the end we're going to have a discussion about what we can do as a community to create this cycle of change in our transportation future. So that's the basic thing, and I want to talk about the overall structure here. You're going to hear from first. You're going to hear from some politicians. You're going to hear from some staff people, and then you're going to finally hear from Wood Zamar, an advocate in Somerville. And this is really based on when I first started working on bike advocacy on a bike trail. This guy, Charlie Gandy, who was a state senator in Texas, came. He was part of the Bike Federation. He talked about how advocacy works. And he talked about having this power triangle. So you have sort of elected officials, policymakers at the top, and they're responding to what people in the public are advocating for. So we as politicians are looking to hear what the residents' needs are. So we're looking to hear what are the issues, what are your concerns as citizens, and then working with you. So we hear that, that we're looking to hear, and for democracy, we want to hear from the people. But we're not necessarily experts in how to make that happen. So we need staff, like we have Jay Monty and Dan we have Jay from Everett, and we have Dan from Arlington here, who are staff people who work to actually then implement these visions that politicians and residents come up with. So it all has to work together, because if we don't have this combination of people, things don't happen. They happen haphazardly. I know one challenge we're having in Malden right now is the MBTA is really taking strong initiatives under a program called the Better Bus Program. And our standard mode of dealing with transportation issues in Malden right now is it's a neighborhood issue. We rely on the ward councilors to work out individual issues on the neighborhood. So each bus stop, we have like 16 bus stops under review. So each one of these is going through a little neighborhood review, and with people who are, we're just making very small decisions, and we're going to make very incremental progress on that. So that is one of the things. We are making some progress, but we're having these challenges that come up because we're doing things in very incremental ways. So the other thing, that was, and this is, you talk about change. So you can work and make big changes like we did with our bike trail to really try to make a systematic change to somewhere. But then you can also learn about tonight how communities are taking those smaller but systematic changes in innovative ways. So that's another thing of the themes tonight. So like I say, a couple of themes is how do elected officials, residents, and staff work together to create change. And another thing is sort of what changes are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve really big things, like Wig Zamer and the city of Somerville have done in terms of getting the Green Line to come there, and the new Orange Line station? Are you trying to do some more incremental things, like you'll hear from Everett and Arlington, to do initially these test bus lanes, and then we implement them longer? So that's the type of thing you have to figure out as a city. What are our big dreams? What are small steps or small trial things we can do to make this all happen? So those are kind of the big themes, the power triangle and the types of change we're trying to achieve. So that's what I want to talk about. So I will now invite Mayor Malden, Gary Christians, to come and talk for a few minutes about what he sees are important issues for transportation in Malden. So thank you, Gary. I really Gary, when we got elected mayor, we were working and getting the bike trail built. We got initially got a dirt trail built. We did the ribbon cutting for that. And Gary at that very meeting said, "We're going to get this paved." And within a year, Mayor Christensen stepped to the plate. And we've been doing the big things like lineup. So we are trying to work and be more innovative, and I think that's a reflection of the mayor. And we want to do more things like that. So Gary, thank you so much for coming out. Great.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Gary Christensen, Mayor of the City of Malden, and let the record show that I walked here this evening. As a matter of fact, I just turned my car in after the lease expired, and the dealership told me that they have never seen someone return a 3-year lease with only 9,000 miles on it. So, thank you so much for having me here this evening, and let me just tell you that, speaking of walking, I'm not sure how many of you know, but Malden now is the 74th most walkable city in the state. And how does that happen? It happens with all of you being here tonight. Because, being walkable is one thing, but to maintain and to continue moving forward, you need folks like you stepping forward to help us make that difference. As Councilor Winslow mentioned, this is the second or third year now we've been with Limelight, and we are part of a consortium within the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And of the cities and towns that are within that program, Malden has the highest usage of any of the communities when it comes to Limelight. As a matter of fact, the biggest users within the program are high school students. So for years we've been trying to figure out, how do we, get our students benefit. This is one way of doing that, because again, they are using the Limelights more than anybody else in our city. We mentioned the bike path. One of the first things that we did working with Councilor Winslow and Bike to the Sea was immediately pave the path. And people have asked me now after several years in office, what's one of the favorite things looking back, and I would have to say the Northern Sharon Community Trail, because it has, brought everybody together to become more well and healthy. We are also part of the Complete Streets program now. I think many of you know. We just started construction at Charles and Main Street, and we are moving on to Salem Ferry, Maine, as well as Forest Winter in Maine this summer. And we're going to reapply for additional projects moving forward. And then, of course, we look back at the 2010 master plan to help guide us on further pedestrian improvements. This doesn't happen alone, as I mentioned. We're joined here tonight by City Councilor Craig Spatafora, Deputy Maria, and Ryan O'Malley. I want to thank them for taking time out of their schedule to be here this evening. And let me just end by saying, again, I want to thank Councilor Winslow and all of you being here, that one of the things that the council has approached us on is that, in order to take that next step, we talked about some programs here this evening, but we believe, thanks to Councilor Winslow, that we need someone, squarely dedicated on transportation issues, much like Jay Monty and others in other cities and towns. So tonight I wanted to announce in the upcoming fiscal year 2020 budget, we are going to include funds for a transportation engineer. Councilor Winslow, we have State Senator Jason Lewis here. Off to my right, we have Representative Steve Winslow. They have really been advocating on behalf of our city to do more, and this was, one of their top priorities, and so we're going to make it happen, and we look forward to our continued work together. Thank you.
All right, I also, before I get too far, I wanted to thank my wife tonight. Ellen is over in the corner. So I really appreciate all the help there. And I know there are other people like Steve Kelty and other people who've been working on environmental issues in Malden, and the hope is to really create a focus on sustainability. So I appreciate those folks as well. And then I wanted to introduce Senator Lewis, who's been very instrumental in bringing some great transportation things to Malden. In particular, I know he's worked very hard on the issue of Highlands and Fells, which will be a much safer intersection for pedestrians and motorists, as well as adding some bicycle accommodations on the Fells Way. So we look forward to that. And Senator Lewis is just a leader. I know particularly you're going to hear about the Mass Motion program. That was a program that's funded all across the state. People focused on health and getting people to move. A lot of those people, including me when I was in Gloucester, worked on transportation and active transportation. So without Senator Lewis's support in that health field, we would not have such good and active transportation happening all across the state. So I appreciate you coming out tonight, Senator.
Good evening, everyone. It's just great to be with you all. So good to see so many people come out tonight for this really important conversation. I too want to echo what the mayor said in thanking Councilor Winslow for all of your hard work, not just bringing us together tonight, but the work you've been doing for years and years with Helen and others in the room to promote healthy transportation alternatives that make such a difference in our community. So thank you very much. And I'm glad Representative Steve Winslow has joined us as well as another great partner here in the city and the state legislature on issues of sustainability. I don't think there's any more important issue for all of us than the future of our planet. All of us, there's nothing we care about more than our children, our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren, and if we don't take more action, we don't act with greater urgency, we're not leaving them the kind of planet that we inherited. Now, sometimes that can seem daunting because these climate change and issues of sustainability and moving to clean renewable energy and all the other things we have to do seem overwhelming. But the reality is that the way we tackle it is at every level, by taking action in our own homes, by taking action in our own communities, like what we're talking about here in the city of Malden, by taking action at the state level, and by taking action at the national level and global level. And obviously we do what we can in our own, what we might call sphere of influence, and each of us has that. In Massachusetts, we are and have been making a lot of efforts to tackle climate change, and we are one of the leading states when it comes to energy efficiency and in starting to move our electric generation from fossil fuels to clean energy. We are making major investments, for example, in offshore wind development, and Massachusetts has actually been described as the Saudi Arabia of wind. So lots of potential there. However, that's good, and we've got a lot more work to do there in the electric generation sector. Where we're not doing so well is in the transportation sector. That is increasingly the sector along the buildings where we are generating so much of our carbon emissions. And this is obviously contributing to climate change and all the environmental degradation. It's also, as we know, a big problem for public health. And if we don't get our act together around transportation, it also threatens our future economy as well. We all see the damages being caused by congestion, lack of safe transportation, problems with our public transportation, and so forth. So that's why sustainability is so important overall, and specifically sustainable transportation is really, really important. As Steve sort of started to lay out, and I know there'll be a lot more discussion tonight, there's no magic bullet here, but there are effective, proven strategies that we can and should be promoting and investing in and supporting. Obviously, first and foremost, public transportation. That is the strategy that we know works well in terms of getting cars off the road, reducing pollution and carbon emissions. And we need to do a better job, obviously, with our EMTA. Getting converting over to electric vehicles needs to be a key part of the strategy. It was great to see what we had outside tonight, and converting individual cars as well as buses and other modes of transit is great. And we are trying to do a number of things at the state level to incent that and to support our local communities, and it's great to see that at the local level as well. The Complete Streets program, which was mentioned, when I was a state representative, I worked with the MAPC to actually file the legislation that created the Complete Streets program. And it's been so exciting to see that now get adopted by cities like Malden, and to see it rolled out in practice. And that's a great example of a partnership, because the state is able to provide additional funding to support those projects here at the local level. So it's great that Malden has embraced that, and I look forward to partnering with the city and with Representative Trino to continue to bring those resources to the city. What else was I going to mention? So a number of other things we talked about: public transit, complete streets, electric vehicles. There's something else I wanted to mention that was particularly important that slipped my mind right now. So, what's that?
The Fellsway.
Certainly, yes, that's another project we've been working on locally. But that's another example of something where we're both improving safety for all modes of transit, right? Because that includes obviously vehicles, but also pedestrians and bicyclists. I know it was the massive motion program, which I think Steve mentioned as well, Malden improving. Another example of being able to support safe pedestrian modes of transit, bicycles. It promotes healthy living, and it's better, obviously, for our environment as well. So thank you, everybody, for everything you're doing on this area. I'm sure we'll have a great program tonight, and I look forward to continuing to do everything I can to support the efforts that I'm undertaking here in the city and around the region. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Director of Sustainability for MassDOT, Jackie DeWolf. I know Jack, I've known Jackie for quite a while. She was one of the first directors of Livable Streets, which is an organization that worked very effectively to ensure that as Massachusetts had a new transportation or roadway design guidelines, that those were implemented in a very practical way. And I remember working early on with Livable Streets on ensuring that Broadway and everything was done had bicycle lanes and that. So she did great work there. That was recognized by our Transportation Secretary, Stephanie Pollock, and created a whole new position in our transportation departments focused on sustainable transportation. So I thought, who better to have to talk about this issue for this forum. So I appreciate Jackie coming out. I know your busy schedule and coming to Malden for us, so thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Thank you, Stephen. As he noted, met a long time ago. I was working at Livable Streets for 9 years, a transportation advocacy group working in communities all around Greater Boston to try to shift the conversation about what transportation is and then how that transpires through design and policy and programs. For the last 2.5 years, I've been working for the state, working at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation as the Director of Sustainability, Sustainable Mobility. And so coming here tonight, I was asked 3 questions. What is sustainable transportation? Why is it important to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation? And how can you help? And I'm going to go through some slides and talk about a couple things, and then I am happy to answer any questions. So the first question, and I get asked this all the time, is what is sustainable mobility? And in my role at MassDOT, how we define it is really advancing the vision and the mission of MassDOT, which is to provide excellent customer service and mobility options to the people living, working, playing, visiting in Massachusetts. And so really a focus on options and making sure that we are giving people options through what we fund, through our policies, through our programs, and through the services we provide. And that looks like a lot of different things. This is just a sample of what that looks like. But ultimately, and what you hear our Secretary of Administration, Governor Baker, and Lieutenant Governor say all the time is transportation is not about what it is. It's not actually, at the end of the day, about the roads and the buses and the vehicles and the bicycles. It's about people. So in thinking about sustainable mobility, it's about people and how do we give people access to where they need to go for daily life, for work, for services. And once you can give people options, you unlock access. And when you unlock access, it's opportunity and the services you need, you want, your community, and really unlocking livability. And when we talk about options, we're talking about all people, we're talking about all ages, and we're also thinking year-round. So what works on a nice sunny day, it's the start of spring, even though it might not feel like it, all the way through those hard winter days, and what that looks like. It's a really exciting time in sustainable mobility because there's just been this burst of innovation and new best practices, guides that engineers and planners used to use for decades. Now there are new design guides and new things coming out seemingly every week, every month, every day. And it looks, again, like a lot of different things, kind of that hard streetscape when it comes to how we design for options and how we design then for better buses and how we design for better pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities and our roadways. And then with that is also this burst of technology. It was really fun to see everything outside, and I hope people had a chance to try out these new vehicles. MassDOT is really supportive and excited about this burst of technology that is showing a lot of promise to give people transportation options. And it's coming in all different forms. And this is, again, just an example, but we're seeing it in, different types of vehicles, and then we're seeing it in kind of the operations, so it's no longer you just have to own it, people are sharing, renting, etc. Some are pedal, some are electric. This is out in Northampton. They have all electric assist bicycle, bike share across 5 different communities, and many different pictures. It's actually my mom testing out an electric line bike that we came across in the fall. So again, to reiterate this point, transportation is not important for what it is, it's about what it does. And that's really where we're coming at from sustainable transportation. This was reinforced again this fall. There was a report that was published for the Baker administration on choices for stewardship recommendation to meet the transportation future. And this lays out a roadmap that we're now using as a state to help meet a lot of goals that were discussed before around sustainability and climate and earth and congestion. And the number one recommendation is still to kind of double down on public transit as, you know, the best promise for moving people. And the focus of this whole report and all the data and what it points to is, again, how do we move people and not just vehicles, and then how is that represented in the decisions we're making, again, to what we fund and the services we provide. And then the second part of that, public transportation is first and foremost, and the second is, you know, how we're rethinking our designs and our roadways to give that priority and make sure we rebalance and kind of move towards mobility options. Why this matters and what's really important in a lot of the work we do is, you know, there's a paradigm shift happening again in kind of the world of transportation planning and design. Historically, so much, and still to today, so much of planning is focused on those kind of peak hours, or what is happening at 5 p.m., and then that kind of drives what the decision is. And that's only a part of the day, and we also know from state and national commuter surveys, household surveys about travel, is it's still only a quarter of trips, and actually some other surveys show commuting trips are only 16%. And so we're trying to also move towards thinking about what are all of those trips people take in any given day, and how do you give people those options. For any given trip, you might not be able to make a mode, change, but how do you start to think about, well, if only there was a bus, I would go to the store, or I'd go to my doctor's appointment, or if there was a safe place to bike, I would use that to get to my friend's house or go to school. And so really thinking about all of those different options. The other thing that we know that I think is really quite surprising, especially when I recently learned it, is how many of our trips in Massachusetts are so short, which is actually another big potential for kind of why we need to do this and why we can really unlock a lot of trips and move people more efficiently, and then also in kind of a healthier way, because 24% of trips are 1 mile or less, going all the way up to 5 miles, 67% of trips. And so when we think about kind of bikeable trips, 5 miles is very bikeable, 3 miles is even more, and that's half the trips in Massachusetts. We also know that a quarter of 1 mile trips are less than a mile. And again, not everyone has a choice to not drive or not be driven. We're not trying to change that. But if people had options and have choices, and what we know from our own outreach and what we know from surveys and what we hear from communities is people want those options. And so how do we better serve those options and start to think a lot more about, these walkable, bikeable distances and really access to transit. And then, we need to scale these options to be able to have movement. As it was noted before, one of the we're doing really well in terms of admissions on a lot of fronts, but from the transportation sector, it's still increasing. And even though we've seen kind of more trips taken by different modes, when you still look at the total miles traveled, it's predominantly by automobiles. So how do we, again, kind of shift this pie to meet our greater goals around public health, economy and mobility, climate change, congestion, and what do we do? A couple more reasons about why, and these are kind of stats pulled directly from recent plans that we just published. You can kind of pick your thing, whether you're coming at it from climate change or environment or public health or livability or community or congestion. There's kind of this, all these different reasons, and a couple ones that really stand out to me. First and foremost is safety, and why we need to be better at designing and planning and providing options for people who are not driving, because even though statewide we've seen crashes and fatalities decrease, we're actually seeing them increase for people walking. And that is incredibly alarming and something that hurts our cause if we want more people to walk and feel comfortable walking, and how do we make it safer. There was 15,000 crashes between 2010 and 2014. And we just published a safety plan. Of course, one is too many, and how do we reverse that trend? The other thing is just changing demographics and the recognition that at any point in a person's life, younger, older, you're injured, whatever it might be, there's different times in your life that if your only option is to drive your own car, that might not be possible, and it's very isolating, and you can be stuck. And so how do you give people options? And that's where creative partnerships around shuttles and public transit and other things come into play. And then the reality, again, that there's a large part of our population who can't drive, other people who choose not to, and that we can't just take it for granted that that's what everyone does and can do, every day of their life. So a couple things I just wanted to highlight that I'm really excited about. In choosing to work for the state, there was a lot of momentum. We had what you heard about, the launch of the Complete Streets Funding Program. There was also the launch of the statewide bike plan and pedestrian plan. There was all this new momentum around the Better Bus Program. And so I was like, great, sign me up. I've been working on these things kind of external to government. Now I want to kind of, get in there and see how I can kind of help advance these issues. And so something we just published in the fall is a statewide bike plan and a statewide pedestrian plan. They're officially in draft form online right now. There's no open public comment period, and we'll be publishing the final plans this spring. But we laid out a couple visions and goals. So for the pedestrian plan, the vision is that all people in Massachusetts have a safe and comfortable option to walk for short trips, with the goal of eliminating pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, and increasing the percentage of short trips made by walking. Another key part of that is kind of principles that we publish. One is treating people the same regard asset management and maintenance and other things that we are very, very good at doing it for the roadway, for where vehicles are curb to curb, and we don't have a lot of systems and policies and plans in place when it comes to facilities for people who are not driving. Focusing on systematic safety improvements. So sometimes there's been a focus just on kind of, we want to complement the focus on, where there are high crashes, and also making sure that we're taking a proactive approach to put in best practices and designs to actually prevent crashes, and making those safety improvements to make people feel comfortable. And the other one is leading by example and supporting municipalities to do the same. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in just a minute. For the bike plan, similar, but a couple nuanced differences. The vision is biking in Massachusetts will be safe, comfortable, convenient option for everyday travel, with the goals of creating high comfort connected bike networks. The work that you heard about around the path here in Malden is a prime example where there's actually a lot of plans coming together from communities all over this region. And as everyone kind of builds out their pieces and all these municipalities are working together and community groups are working together, you can actually start to see a really comprehensive network where you can start to actually get to a lot of different destinations. You can get to transit, get to different places, and it's really exciting to see. And so we want to help make that happen and also foster that in regions all across the Commonwealth. And then just increase the convenience and attractiveness of everyday biking as it comes to everything else that comes with it, with the challenges of why people choose not to bike today. One of the key things of the bike plan is we did focus groups with a lot of different groups of people across the Commonwealth. We have a lot of data. There's a whole report online from our public engagement plan that really drove kind of what is in this plan and what we're going to do to be able to help people in all different communities feel like they have a safe and comfortable option. Similar principles, again, as the pedestrian plan that we're communicating through the bicycle plan. One of the key things, and what was so exciting about being invited here tonight, is that municipal partnership and how critical it is, because the state can't do it alone. And I knew that as an advocate, because when people would say, well, how did that success happen? The success always happened when there was synergy between the community, between an advocacy group, between the design consultants and the municipality and the state, and kind of everything came together in Stephen's triangle. That's really when we saw change happen. And it's only been reinforced when I've gone out to work for the state that needs to still happen. You can still have wonderful people in government, you can have wonderful elected officials, but you still need that partnership at kind of all levels to really make something happen. And for Mass DOT, another surprise when I went to work there is that we only actually own 8% of roadways in Massachusetts. And so that's where we want to lead by example on our roadways, and then ultimately, and lead by example, but then we complete, programs like Complete Streets to provide funding so that municipalities who actually own 81% of roadways can advance these initiatives locally. So two other resources that I would point you all to that are online is a municipal resource guide for walkability and a municipal resource guide for bikeability. And so we publish these alongside our plans to be resources to communities to be able to advance this work locally. What we do impacts infrastructure and therefore options. These are some of my favorite failed photos. This one I actually just took in the last snowstorm of the sidewalk was actually plowed by a sidewalk plow and then just stopped. And then all the roadway snow was pushed right into the corner, right where the curb cut is, right at the intersection and where you have to hit the push button to be able to cross the street. This is one of our Hartwell bus stops where the post is behind a guardrail where it just drops off to the water with no place to sit, wait, or safely be. And this is like a telltale sign. When I always hear, why are those people, crazy darting across the street, or those bicyclists are cutting, across 3 lanes. It's like they're just trying to go left, probably. And, these people are just trying to cross the street. And if we haven't given them a way to do that, they will do it, or they think they can. I've all had that experience. And then the sidewalk one is just classic. So we talked a lot about, can you just imagine a road that just ends? And so we need to take these values and you have to start somewhere. And so by starting somewhere, you will create gaps. But then the key part of the plans we have and where we look to leadership of municipalities is now how do we go back and how do we close those critical gaps. This is just an example out in Northampton where they had this wonderful multi-use path network, and they had a huge gap that was only a couple hundred feet long. And what you see on the top left is the community over and over and over just cut the fence, put boards in, and everyone would just kind of walk across, bike across, tractor trailer go across. And so sometimes when people think about project costs, it's not just about what the length is and how much does it cost, because in this sense, we built a tunnel underneath the rail and you unlock this huge network. Another key thing in all of this is practical design. We talk about a lot. Moving away from thinking about just kind of what are minimums, because right now, a lot of minimums define you've checked the box if you've put in a 5-foot sidewalk, or you've put in a 5-foot shoulder and put, stamp on it. And what we know is that's not what actually gets people to want to get on their feet. Or, you can have a bus run, but if it's just sitting in traffic and it's slower than every other option, it's not like, yay, let me go. We have to create networks that make people want to get onto public transit, that make people want to get on buses and bikes and on foot, on scooters and whatever the next new technology is. And so we're really promoting a lot of kind of context-sensitive solutions, practical design that kind of fits the context, whether it's really rural or very dense and urban solutions. So coming here tonight, and just to wrap up, I just did one view of Malden. You all live here, you are the experts, which is why it's so important for communities. And that's like this to kind of, for people to kind of come together. But when I really take a quick one view of Malden, it's amazing. It's a community that there's so much going on. You have so much right here. You have transit in all different forms, and not that great of a distance, to be able to crisscross in all different ways. It's been really exciting. Malden, as it was mentioned, is part of the Mascot Complete Streets funding program. So for those who don't know, your leaders in government, applied for this, went through public process, have a stated policy that's officially been submitted to the state, they have a prioritization plan, and then they applied for capital. And what this shows is that Malden then also got this capital funding, which was talked about before. So Malden is definitely a leader, in the state to advance these, and we're happy that as a state and elected officials who were able to get this money from the legislature, that now we can administer this program. And our hope is that it kind of helps kickstart, communities, and that these kind of ideals and policies are further implemented. Another quick snapshot, in our bicycle plan, we created a map, and Malden comes up like bright blue, which is kind of the highest potential demand for biking. It's based on where short trips are happening, access to transit, crashes and where people are biking or could bike, and so again, another potential. Transit, again, Malden, you're right in the thick of having a lot of transit, but you also have some lines, which is why you're part of the Better Bus program, that are seeing this kind of great potential for changes, and it's definitely great to hear from Jay and Dan, who will talk about their bus work as they show up on this map as well. So just to conclude, in terms of how you can help in thinking about this, there's a couple different things. I mean, of course, first and foremost is safe and responsible behavior, driving, walking, biking, scooting, whatever it may be. I love this sign. This is from another town, Massachusetts, where they have a lot of these drive like your kids live here. But the other thing that's so critical are these forums to kind of learn and to share and inspire a vision, even with changes, like I said, and just speaking for myself, when I went to the state after working in community organization and being very vocal and public on these issues, it didn't stop there. When I actually went to the state, you have your work, and I still rely on community groups and advocacy groups to inspire that vision, because they're really the local experts, and they, really can share what they envision, what they want, and that drives a lot of work, especially when you can feel very removed from the work. That's when you're not, just coming from the community. And so inspiring a vision of what you want to see, and then making your voice heard and sharing that and speaking up. I think what's also really important in this is it's the good and the bad, and so speaking up when something's not going well and you're not happy, and then getting a chance to become friends with people in government and elected officials and give them the opportunity to do the right thing, before it's just, public shaming. But then it's also giving thanks, so when things are going well, reinforcing. Because I can't tell you how many times people say, well, I haven't heard anything good about it, so it's like, people will always do the negative, they'll always, complain or have something to say, but it's also so important to give thanks and be excited and reinforce good things, as much as it is to say, hey, we're not happy with the status quo and we want to see change. And then what's really exciting to see is just communities trying something and piloting something. This is just a picture on the bottom right, where we're seeing a lot of innovation happen, where you don't have to wait for the big capital dollars to come in 5, 10, 15 years, but where communities are going to take action, reclaiming street space, trying things, testing things, using materials, and being able to see what's possible. So that was my contact, but I'm happy to answer questions now or after, or...
Yeah, I mean, do people have some questions or comments or anything like that? Feel free.
You said 9% of the roads are owned by someone else, so who are some of the entities that own some of the other roads in the state?
So it's majority municipalities. So let's go back here. So what you have is you have 81% Hartford's municipality. 8% is the state transportation department. 1% is the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, so a lot of parkways. 1% is state parks, and 9% is other. That other is a mishmash of private and other roadways or undefined.
Thank you for coming and speaking with us. It was very informative. I think both the notion of sustainable transport and giving people options are extremely attractive. My primary way of getting around the Boston area is the MBTA, and we just had another fare increase announced. It's very, very well known that when fares go up, ridership goes down. It seems to me very likely that it's probable that options will decrease as a consequence. So I really hope that DOT is thinking about sustainable funding, because putting it on the backs of the people who use it is not sustainable, is not good for the people who need it the most, and seems like a dead end and seems contradictory to everything else we're talking
And one thing I would point people to is last week when the board made that vote to increase fares, not for all riders, so anyone who is eligible, it's youth, older adults, and other assistance programs won't increase, buses won't increase, but there will be an increase that many people will feel. The board, it's now all of their debates and discussions and decisions are both live and then they're recorded and they're online. You can go back and look. I definitely encourage people who are really kind of thinking about that debate and conversation to go back and look at that, because I think that really, I won't be able to do it justice to simple, to recover it, and then you can really kind of follow where the discussion is going. And I think it's going to take, again, that kind of pyramid of a lot of different people, communities, state, elected officials to work together on future solutions.
Yeah, is Senator Lewis still here? No, he can step up. But I know there's also an initiative. I think everybody had heard about the millionaire's tax. Some of that money was going to go to transportation, some to education, and because the way it was put up there, the SJC did not allow that to go to the ballot. I know Senator Lewis is working. It said that the House and the Senate put on the ballot and won't have the constitutional issue. So I know our delegation and Rep. Altrino. Okay. Okay. Stand up. Representative Steve Altrino.
The hearing for the fair share amendment is April, I'm just looking on my phone now, April 11th at 11 a.m. in the Gardner Auditorium. And that's to hear Rep. O'Day from Worcester and Senator Lewis. We need to have a hearing before, I think, April 23rd, so we can have a constitutional convention. So it will take another, it would be on the ballot in about 3 years, because it has to have 2 consecutive constitutional conventions. The way it was written this time is that it's a legislative proposal rather than a resident referendum. That's why the Supreme Court judged it unconstitutional. So we have to go back and start over, but hopefully within 4 years that revenue would be coming in if it does pass, and it would go transportation and education.
Good. Thanks for that update. So yeah, I mean, I guess if people can come out and support that, and let Steve and other people.
Hi, my name is Anna. I primarily get around Malden by walking. I saw, in your presentation you were talking about safety, but you were primarily talking about not getting hit by cars, which is an important type of safety, and I appreciate. But we live in the Northeast, and it gets dark relatively early. So, are you working with people to talk about other forms of safety? Are these paths well lit at night? Do people feel comfortable walking home from, say the T at 10 o'clock at night to go home?
Yeah. So thank you, because I could talk all day about our pedestrian plan. So that's a huge focus. When it comes to safety, it's a multiple layers, addressing both the safety as it relates to kind of vehicle to pedestrian relationships and speed, and but then visibility is another huge component, traffic calming, also maintenance, and just making sure that year-round, facilities are maintained, and then also snow and ice operations. So the plans, we really look at it like multifaceted. The reason why these plans are significant is not because we just have a plan, but because actually leadership earmarked money in our next capital budget to actually support implementation. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 5 years is everything in that plan we're going to implement with the capital to support it, and a lot of that will be going towards all those aspects of safety. It's not just a one-size-fits-all, absolutely not. The resource guide also goes into all those different facets as well. But yeah, the visibility thing is huge. It's huge.
And then I know I was amazed that we have a whole new resurgence of people with our walkability committee. And they kicked the traffic commission out of their meeting the other night. So I think that might be something to bring to our new kind of revamped walkability committee, because I know when I was in Gloucester, we worked on, they had a pretty good sidewalk network, but they had some places where they had gaps, and then eventually the DPW there helped close a lot of gaps. But maybe we should look at lighting gaps and safety gaps, and maybe it's something we need to do in Malden. We have a pretty good network of sidewalks, but I know like Councilor O'Malley, and the MRA who's here tonight, working to put new lighting in Cornwall Park, and maybe there's more gaps like that. I know there's some places on the Northern Strand Trail, there's gaps, so maybe that'd be some good issue for the walkability committee to look at, is where is kind of those places you don't feel comfortable walking because of lighting and other things.
And that's where something where we can provide the resources of here's why to do it and how to do it, and then even funding to support it. But it's the community then who knows where it's needed, and and we'll do our best to kind of monitor our state-owned roadways, and that you all are the experts to know, hey, when I go on this way, there's these gaps,
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan O'Malley. I'm the ward for city councilor. I want to thank you again for coming. One of the challenges we have in Malden, and I'm sure you face across the state, is the fact that we have traffic commissions that often do not have actual traffic mitigation experience and expertise. So oftentimes we come up with great ideas of how to make our roads safer, but our traffic commission shuts them down because they say you need to have a $20,000, $30,000 traffic study. How can we handle that? And is there any way the state can kind of come up with a standard design of what would work so that we don't necessarily have to get approval from a traffic commission in each individual municipality? Because like Malden, Melrose, Everett all used to be Malden, and Broadway, Main Street, they're all the same street, but the traffic patterns and the traffic mitigation is different in each community. It's difficult to manage regionally.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was a loaded question.
No, I don't have a one-stop shop answer, and I was going to say maybe, Steve does, and, my colleagues here from other municipalities might have some more insight. I mean, certainly we face this all the time. I face this, at DOT, where we say, we can't do something, we have to do it, we have to do a study first. I think again, that's where kind of learning and sharing best practices is really important. More than ever, there's new guidelines that have been adopted that are now respected. The Federal Highway just came out with Achieving Multimodal Networks, which is an amazing guide. And so I think a lot of it is where, but because things are changing so fast, just kind of getting these best practices and getting these guides that, make people feel more comfortable in trying to implement something. And then there's the last thing I said about kind of trying and piloting is when there are opportunities to try something as part of a study. And so you're not waiting, for the study, and then you're waiting for capital dollars to, reconstruct the street, where there are opportunities to do things in the interim. But then it's totally a case-by-case basis.
So I just have something. I wanted to form a transportation study committee that's specifically looking at that. And I know, Ryan, you were on our charter review committee, and under our city charter, our traffic commission has exclusive jurisdiction over setting up rules and regulations for our parking and our roads. So our city council doesn't decide our things, our traffic commission does. And that's actually unique because a lot of other cities and towns, they're either town meeting or their aldermen or their city councils have some more influence. So that's one of the things that we're looking at our city charter to look at who is on our traffic commission and what kind of political outlets. Because like I say, right now our traffic commission has no, there's no city councilor there. There's really no political influence there. And I think it's what we see in other communities, like in Arlington. I think Dan's from Arlington. Their traffic commission is made up of primarily residents, Brookline and other communities. So it's something we should look at as we're reviewing our charter. And that's one way everybody can get involved in it. I guess as we have hearings on the charter, speak up, say you want citizens representation on the charter committee. We want some, that's one of the things we want, a traffic commission that reflects every mode of transportation and your interests. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at. So that's one of the things, definitely, we're going to get that information to the charter commission committee soon. So thank you. I think, well, thanks. Did Alex have one? Alex,
Yeah, just thank you. Just real quickly, thank you for this presentation. It's very helpful. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about dedicated bus lanes, what that would look like in Malden, the pros and cons for a community like Malden, and what the process would be, and how we would know if that was something that was okay.
So I'm going to actually deflect that question because we have two people who have talked specifically about this. So.
Wait, but I want to say one thing.
So one thing from
because MassDOT is MBTA too, and so a lot of them represent MBTA work. So you're going to hear really great examples of what it looks like and options and trade-offs and all that in two presentations. But what I will say is if there is any interest, MBTA effectively is doing a call to municipalities to say we want to partner with you, because what it looks like is we operate buses, but we operate it on your town or your city's land. And so we need that partnership. And so it looks different in a lot of different ways to make buses more reliable. There's a lot of different tools to make it more reliable, but that partnership is really key. So people being more excited about buses, we want that, the MTA wants that partnership. And it hasn't always felt like an open door in the past, and today it's very much an open door, and there are two great examples of other municipalities who, have made that partnership actually work.
All right, well, perfect transition. Thank you so much, Jack. I guess the next presentation. All right, I next want to bring up Jay Monty, who's the traffic engineering planner from the city of Everett. And I think I've known Jay since you've come on to Everett. Through the work of the Northern Strand Trail, I've had the opportunity to work with planning staff from Everett, all the way over to Lynn. And I think it's Jay's just been doing magical work over there in terms of all modes of transportation. And I think you'll talk about bus lanes. There's great progress on the Northern Strand Trail. We're really excited in a couple of aspects of that is that Everett is working to another mile of trail that will connect the end of the trail down at Western Welland Street all the way down to the Mystic River, the casino. And hopefully we'll actually go right over to Assembly Square. So we're very excited about that. And the other end, I guess people don't know, we got to thank Governor Baker and the Trails team from the state, who is now working on improvements in Malden and Everett, as well as paving the trail all the way over to Lynn. So I think in this year we should see a groundbreaking for the final paving of the trail. And Jay is really critical in that work, and he's been doing amazing things in Everett since he's been there, so I appreciate Jake coming up to talk about all that amazing work. Thank you, Jake.
So thanks, Steve, for the kind words and also for the invitation here tonight. As you mentioned, we've been working together for a few years now, mostly on the Bush Trail. I think it speaks to actually really the partnerships that even us as city staff, and us city staff have a reputation for wanting to do things, unilaterally, but we really do rely on advocacy partners in many cases to achieve goals. And Steve is a great example of having a good partner in the trail. Steve asked me to come tonight and just give a little bit of perspective. I didn't realize that you guys had just had to hire a transportation planner. I'm excited you are, and hopefully my big people use some guidance to think about when you bring that person on, how you want to interact with them, and how to, what results you expect and how to achieve those results. So, I think you all know where it is, hopefully. But the point I wanted to make here was not different from Malden, not different from Chelsea, but we're actually very geographically isolated, right? So we're so close to Somerville, Cambridge, to Boston, to East Boston, and yet we have rivers in a way. We have very few roadway connections to those places. We have no commuter rail station, no MBTA station, no key bus routes. Key bus routes are the buses that come at similar frequencies. So we have none of those things. And we're so close to the city, we're really should be a mecca for folks who want to commute to the city, commute to Cambridge. So it's really a great place for the workforce to live, work, and play. And so my role as a planner is really to mitigate that geographic isolation in many ways, and to do so through reducing vehicle dependency, through improving transit, through improving bicycle active transportation. And the last one is kind of a pet of mine, but making diversity. Jackie alluded to this a bit too. Transportation is more than just going from A to B. And you think of places like Grand Central Station in New York, which are not, of course they're not transportation, but they're not a place too. And certainly we don't have Grand Central Station here in Malden and Everett, but why can't the MBTA station, why can't the bus stops reflect a sense of place? And this vibrant square is vibrant, people can get there and get there because of good transportation. So the two really are, in my mind, very informed. So I'm not going to talk a ton about the bus lane. Dan's going to do a great presentation on that. So I think most probably heard when I showed all this many times and don't want to hear it again. But I do want to look through some of the projects that we've done in the last 4 years since I came on in Everett. This being kind of our flagship projects where we introduced a dedicated bus lane on Route 99 on Broadway. Councilor O'Malley, you brought up the point that these roads, they look at the communities, they're really the same road, but very different looks, very different feels. And so Route 99 up in Malden, as you approach Route 60 in the shopping center, it's the same width road, it's the same amount of space. Looks very different than Route 99 here in Broadway with bus lanes and bike lanes, things like that. So a lot of this is choosing how we best use our space. And in this instance, we removed 200 parking spaces every morning as a pilot, as a test. We kind of just there said, hey, let's do it. A lot of credit was to be in this, but really it was a political will, political decision that made this happen. And the decision was that the process to get to this was to try it and to see if it worked. And luckily, through some good plans and good strategy, it did. So every morning now we have about 1.5 miles of Broadway that is a dedicated bus lane. Reduce travel times on the bus by 30 or more %. And I think also creates a great visible example of where our priorities are. And that has gone, bus ridership on the whole, my investment experience in Jackie has an answer, or more accurate answer. I've heard that ridership system as a whole has gone down 2 to 3% in the past 2 years. And every bus ridership actually went up. And so, sure, you can only say 2 minutes and you're commute on the bus, but that perception that you are being prioritized on the street, that this is kind of what we want folks to do and how we want them to use our streets, that is reflected in the way they go and use those. We've also experimented with level bus boarding. This was a project we did last summer. So similar to dance projects, there were several communities last summer that we applied to demonstrate our use of bus rapid transit. What's bus rapid transit? Bus rapid transit is a bus that, for lack of a better term, acts like a train, okay? So it has a dedicated right of way, it has priority intersections. You pay not on the bus, you pay the fare gate. One of the aspects of the whole border, you shouldn't have to walk, you shouldn't have to step up onto the bus, right? If you have a mobility impairment, if you have a walker, a shopping cart, a stroller, a wheelchair, it's actually a big deal to make that step up onto the bus. It's not easy. And it's not easy for the individual. It takes time for the bus to lower, to put up the ramp, to do all these things that degrades the service. And so, why is it that a bus cannot act like a train and have mobile boarding from the sidewalk? So that's what we did here. We designed it in-house and sort of invented this contraption to stack on top of the sidewalk, but it raised the sidewalk by about 6 inches to the level of the store. And we still have them up in the first square. Check them out. They were pretty good. Could use some tweaks, but I think we're relatively happy with that. We're doing a lot of our biking these days. Some of it, of course, is next to the casino, the outdoor casino. A lot of it is also doing our own planning efforts, our own efforts. So here, Councilor Winslow, 7 or 8 years ago, passed bike lanes on 99. We're taking the next step now. We're going to curb separated raised bike lanes on 99. So you see here in front of the bad shark, and then in front of the casino, where there's going to be a floating bus stop, like actually behind the bus stop. Next one, which you'll see in a couple of weeks or a couple months maybe, is I'm calling the Malden connector. And this is going to be part on-road separated and part off-road separated, connecting Route 99, Main Street traffic circle over Route 16 down to essentially to Wellington. So the on-road on that ramp portion goes from 99 to Best Buy, and then here you see off-road next to Best Buy and over to the Woods Bridge over the river and into Wellington. So this is, I think, a big deal. This actually provides a almost entirely off-road bicycle connection from downtown Edinburgh to an MBTA station. Malden River Greenway, here's a great example of where I think our advocate partners have really driven the conversation, driven the agenda. So this is really starting to weave together the paths along the Malden River, from all the way from the Uncle Casino back behind the OG parcel by Malden English School, right up here in the morning. So we're making a lot of progress on that. We've got a mile of path over this year as a result of those efforts. Bike share, which you guys are all familiar with here. We have a line bike, which we'll roll out in Malden. I think we're second actually after you guys in terms of ridership, but we're not quite on top. But been a very successful program. The dockless component has been a little bit contentious at times, but I think overall it's been a very good experience. And this summer we're going to add that blue bike, which is the system you see in Boston and Cambridge. These are the docked bikes. And the reason we're adding this, in addition to line bikes, is that today you can't ride a line bike into Boston and into Cambridge. There's an exclusivity agreement that prevents those communities from allowing line bikes in. So we really feel it's important to connect Everett to job centers in Kendall Square and downtown Boston. So we've taken quite a bit of effort to fund and bring blue bikes to Everett this coming spring. So I want to talk a little more about my role as a planner and where you all think about what you want in the planner. June was going to come here next year. How do you want them to work with you? How do you want them to plan to implement? And so, the kind of basic definition of a planner, right, is you plan, you design, you implement. That's kind of the basics. But in that, there's a lot more. Okay? So there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of outreach to constituents, outreach to other state agencies. I spend probably a good 50% of my time not on my desk, but at Mass DOT and working with Bike City or any number of advocate groups or MAPC, the regional planning agency. So these relationships, this outreach really builds consensus, it builds the agenda, and it'll connect you with resources to implement change in the community. You really, as a planner, need to be a jack of all trades in many instances. So, there's days where I have spent an overnight laying out pavement markings for a line on the DPW crew, and the next day, then up in the governor's office with the mayor, talking about from that very top leadership level right down to the planning, engineering, the DPW, in order to kind of make these things seamless to bring them from start to finish. I'm working this up because I think it's an important point to think about, again, how you want your planner to act. And I sort of call it agenda versus consensus planning, and it's more of a spectrum, it's not one or the other. But is the expectation of the planner to advance a policy agenda or to oversee a consensus building process? I think a lot of communities have some different experience with this. So it varies from community to community, varies from project to project. And so, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take the bikes, for example. So the decision to put bikes on the street, the decision to prioritize bicycles was a agenda decision by the mayor, right? So my role at that point is to figure out how to get the bikes down, how to get bikes out, and how to make the system work. Just one example. In that particular case, we felt that the need to build consensus on the issue wasn't really necessary, so we went and did it. But in other cases, on the right, you see our neighborhoods project. This was a traffic calming program that we're advancing with a consultant of ours. And this goes into the neighborhood. This really works with the neighbors, the residents, and asks them, okay, we know you have an issue with you've been asking us to calm traffic on the street. Let us help you do that. And how do we help you do that? We do that by having community, socials and really letting the sort of design evolve from the community. And at the end, the community actually comes out and helps paint the crosswalks or put up bollards or things like that. So the point here is that these are two very different processes. Either one is right, either one is wrong, and it's going to vary depending on the project and depending on the community, what you choose and where on the spectrum you decide to be. But the results of which way you decide to go may be very different, and so always keep that in mind. Even with our everyday cars and local streets, mass bike, I try very hard to look to Steve, the see agenda, right? We want to see the path finished. So that, in a sense, is an agenda, but on the other hand, we do always want to involve the community. So just some of the food. So I want to talk a little bit about some specific plans that we worked on that have resulted in measurable action in the city. And the first is the Immigrant Transit Action Plan. This was actually a MassDOT-driven plan. This was, I think, something MassDOT is and should be really proud of. There's only a few like this done. This actually led to the dedicated bus lanes. And I think it embodies sort of the approach which I see as a very successful plan that goes right from sort of policy and idea-driven, but then right down to how do you get the results, make sure that your plan isn't just a plan that sits on the shelf. We did some very targeted public outreach, so beyond just having public meetings at 7 p.m., we went and did outreach at the bus stops, on the bus, so really reaching people where they were. Data-driven analysis, so a lot of work was done looking at demographics, looking at travel patterns, looking at the operational characteristics of the bus system. And from that, we developed achievable action items. So, sure, it would be great to have the orange line come to Everett and have our own T-stop at Everett, absolutely. But that's not achievable in the time that we're all going to be here on planet Earth. So we had to have something a little more reasonable that we could do and show some results. And then the last one is the shared implementation responsibilities. We're all responsible at the end of the day. It's not just the city, it's not just MassDOT. It's you all as residents, you all as constituents. It's everybody needs to participate in the game and some skin in the game. So this report can really embody that. And just showing a little more indication of the outreach, events we did. We just saw the square, bus stop surveys, football games, open houses, online surveys. Work pretty well, so we can get some voices in the room. And you said a lot of this was sort of how we laid out the recommendations. So it really shows sort of the project, description of the project, the benefits. Is it expensive? Is it not expensive? What's the time frame we should really be looking at in terms of implementation? Is this a 10-year project, or is something we really ought to do like tomorrow? And who's responsible? So in most cases, it's everybody. So the city, the MTA, MassDOT, And so I think this really brought a sense of accountability to, if you're going to make a recommendation, if you're going to make a plan, who's going to do it and how are you going to do it? Because if you don't figure that out, it's probably not going to happen. This is sort of the outgrowth of that plan. This is something we're just wrapping up now. It's not public yet, it's not finished yet, but I want to preview it here. This is called our Urban Transportation Strategy. Using the title still, but we'll roll that for now. Again, taking that same framework, our objective is to improve the lives and mobility of current Everett residents, support Everett's future development by expanding mobility options. Those are pretty big, but we're going to build out, right? We're going to take those and we're going to make some goals for them. All residents should have access to jobs, goods, and services through an easy or direct quality pedestrian, bike, or transit connection. All residents should have access to a frequent transit service within a 10-minute walk. 100% of the new and 50% of existing housing should have access to a dedicated bicycle facility. I think the big one here is increase commutes by transit to 50% and decrease drive-alone commutes to 30%. And here in the middle are the action projects that are going to help us achieve that. So establishing additional dedicated bus lanes, expanding regional rapid transit, maybe the Silver Line to Everett, improving other internal mobility, more bike paths, and also getting into the policy issues, parking. We're going to have a discussion this year where we really want to drive down parking requirements that are required of developers. We want to discourage parking because we know that making parking better fit the development creates better developments and drives people to be more likely to use transit. So that's a discussion we're going to have this coming year. We'll talk about that a lot. So here's just sort of our strategy. Still debating on who are our partners going to be, right? So our partners are going to be on Casino. We're going to provide input to programs that are engaged in our bus project. We're going to be active in providing input. Develop integrated plans. If we're going to do a development land use plan for a portion of the city, well, we're going to make sure that transportation demand is a part of that. If we're going to generate X number of trips through a project, and we want to get 50% vote share, how many buses is that? It's actually a lot of buses to get 50% vote share on, 5,000 residents. So we want to integrate those plans better. Increase density standards, citywide design standards. So trying to drill down to creating development that feeds transit and alternative mobilities, not more vehicle trips. And we're going to get down right to the dirty details, right? So back to the discussion of placement in transit. We got to start with bus stops, right? So we can't have these bus stops that are these barren strips of nondescript sidewalk next to the gas station. We're going to start making these actual facilities that people feel comfortable in, that people want to use. And we're going to do so by, whether it's curb extensions, we're going to stop out to the roadway, if there's going to be shelters, lighting, information, like real-time arrival information, when's the bus coming? Folks want to know that. So there's some of the kind of dirty details of how we're going to get to implementation. Parking. I think I spoke about parking much, but again, we're going to really start to build down onto, as soon as you look at this graph here, you can't quite see the text, but what you see is the red color on the left is if we were to take a specific type of land use, and the top row is fast food. So red is of the property that they're on, the amount of space that is used for the eat, i.e. the restaurant. And the gray is the amount of space used for parking. And you work your way down, and next one looks like it's retail, office, restaurants, and another one has no parking. So we're using a lot of space for parking. We've got to address that. It's not sustainable. So we're going to be working the hardest here to start to chip away at that. I want to leave with just a few thoughts. I think a planning process is most effective when it provides clear answers and next steps. So clearly define the problem and goal that you're all looking to solve. And make sure that there's decision points within that process. If you're going to do a plan, don't end the plan with 5 options and then leave it for somebody else to figure out which one to do. Make the decision in the plan, and set up the next steps so they're ready to happen in the next phase of work. So I'll give the bike path as an example again. First taking the bike path from Western Malden down to the river. We did a planning study, looked at 3 options. The study ended with a very clear decision that this was the one route we were going to take. Here's the concept, here's even a little bit of preliminary engineering. So the next step was just get the engineer on board and design it. And so in that planning process, we consulted with the community, we consulted with all the stakeholders, and got to an answer. And I think that's really important that you have an answer at the end of the planning process. It's not always possible, but I think in most cases it is. Provide a mechanism of accountability for project stakeholders. So I think it's very easy for all of us to, walk into a room and provide our unbiased opinion on something. But I think it's also important we all have accountability for not only that opinion, but for making sure that whatever we decide, we are willing to follow through with. There's many ways of doing that. I won't go into here, but just something to keep in mind. We're all, at the end of the day, are accountable for what we're trying to achieve. I think from a planning perspective, oftentimes that means identifying a project champion. So these projects go through many phases of from policy, planning to design. And so if you're not careful, you can hand it from one person to the next person to the next person, and it's like the game of telephone. The original intent of the project may get lost on that way. So I think one of the roles of a planner can be that champion. It is not always a planner. But it is important to find somebody that can really take that project from beginning to end and ensure that the goals that you set out to achieve, are continuous throughout the process for your implementation. So, I'll leave with that, and happy to take any questions. And if anyone wants to chat a little bit.
Why doesn't everybody stand up for a minute or two and shake while we transition over to the
parking? I know the parking hours basically is a better indication of who you're trying to serve. So if you can, in case of bike path, can you target the folks who are going to be not only, of course, there's a part of that, but there are many others who have a best interest in happening, so that's to make sure that they're part of the
it's, I know people getting restless, so why don't we move on here? We have Dan, I think your last name is Ernst, from Arlington. He's a new planner there, and he's been involved in reviewing the successful bus project that they put there. So his talk is specifically focused on this bus priority lane project and the results they found in Arlington. So thanks, Dan, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Steve. Again, my name is Daniel Anstetz. I work for the town of Arlington as a senior transportation planner. Like you said, I've been there about 6 months now. And he asked me to talk about this particular project, and I kind of came in midstream. So I apologize if I'm a little bit sketchy on some of the beginning details of it, but I started right about before we started the pilot itself, and I've gone through the review process and continued from there. But I'm actually pretty familiar with Massachusetts. I've lived most of my life here, but I just spent 5.5 years in North Carolina and just came back, and I'm very excited to see all the things that are happening at MassDOT. Funding programs that are coming out, and there's a lot of excitement with things that are happening. Let me just jump right into it, and so basically I'm going to talk about the kind of background of the BRT pilot, the bus rapid transit pilot, how we sort of implemented it, evaluated it for the next steps, and then a Q&A at the very end. But the Arlington became part of the 2018 cohort with the different bus pilots that were happening around the Boston region. Our foundation had a sort of call for projects to have communities come out and propose different types of bus priority projects, and we're giving out $100,000 grants to communities in order to implement it. There's one of them, one of Cambridge and Watertown, each received a grant for in order to do these sort of projects. The sort of level boarding, lead in the bus priority lane, and also Watertown is doing bus lanes on Auburn Street. And where we ended up focusing in on, which I'll talk about in a moment, is the Massachusetts Avenue corridor running by the Cambridge line, which meets up with the Parkway at Route 16, which Route 16 is Route 2A. And sort of why did we apply and why did we choose this particular corridor? Well, we have a number of different bus routes in Arlington, about 8 or 9 total, and 3 of which are here that travel along Massachusetts Avenue. So 77 is an MBTA key bus route, meaning that it's in the top 15 routes in the system that, in terms of ridership, so the top in terms of ridership. And so, as you can see, 77 has, over 7,600 riders per day. Route 79 and Route 250. 77 goes from Arlington Heights to Harvard Busway, Harvard Station. 79 goes from Arlington Heights to Alewife, and then 350 goes from Alewife to Burlington, the Burlington Mall. And so these are routes that carry quite a lot of people. 70% of Arlington residents actually commute by bus. And we have heard over 10,000 riders per day traveling along these routes, and we frequently, consistently hear complaints from riders about their bus experience, about how challenging it is to get through this route, which is about 5.5 miles long. It can take an hour, 50 to 60 minutes to get through because of all the congestion on the road that's taking place. And so we want to focus in on this area as there are several different areas in town where the 77 gets caught up, but right at Mass Ave and Route 16 where there's a really long intermediate several cycles just to get through this intersection and get across and into Cambridge to the other side. And another reason, so what happens of course is that the bus gets several minutes behind schedule. In the 50th percentile, it's sort of the median, that's usually 3 to 5 minutes behind schedule between their schedule and their actual departure times. And then in the 90th, which would be sort of the worst time, or sort of one of the really bad days, it can be 10 to 20 minutes behind schedule. And this is, we certainly, like I said, we're here to place for residents about this, and it's something that we can bring to the MTA, saying that this is a big issue, operations are a problem, but as Jack mentioned earlier, we own property. The T runs the buses on the property on the roads that we own. So there are things that we can do as communities to actually improve the bus service. As the T is working on new operations, there are things we can do to deal with some of these issues by changing our routes. And so again, these travel times, the long wait time, they create long wait times, we create overcrowding, we create these bus bunching issues where we have 2 or 3 buses, 377s that are all on the road, trying to pick up all those passengers that have been waiting an extra amount of time because of traffic. And so so from this was supported through our select board, through our town manager, really, to go ahead and apply for this and move forward with this as a project that we've never done in Arlington before, something really kind of innovative and different from sort of our normal operating procedure. And our pilot goals are really to reduce the travel time, increase the reliability of the buses, and of course with the traffic flow, partly taking the buses out of that traffic flow and doing some other things. We've changed some of the signals and we changed signal timing in order to do that. And I'll talk a little more about that. So I think it's interesting, Jay was just talking about the difference between the policy agenda and the consensus agenda, or policy planning and sort of consensus planning. And this was, I would say started as kind of a policy type experience. But in order to implement that, it becomes a real consensus building activity that we go through. There was the real sort of spearhead for this really came through our Department of Planning and Community Development, which is the department where I work in. And we, coordinated, really became the champions of this, and coordinated this broad in our public works, the police department, manager's office, through those internal stakeholders that really needed to get on board in order to do this. And also with our external stakeholders, not just our residents and business community, but also the other players involved in either their own property or that are involved with what the Bar Foundation is doing, including, so there's the city of Cambridge owns the lights that are at Ellenwood Parkway, signals that are at Ellenwood Parkway and Mass Ave, but the Department of Conservation and Recreation owns the parkway. So we have worked within that, for that particular intersection, for changes we wanted to make that we had to work closely with them. We hired the HVA consulting firm to do our planning design work and do analysis for us in order to figure out how we were going to do this bus lane. The Institute for Transportation Design or Development and Policy also, was another sort of couple of consultants as part of this. So there were a number of different players that were working on this. It really wasn't just the town that was working on this, but lots of different players we worked with. And then, of course, the residents. We worked very closely with the area that we suggest that we selected between Lake Street and the Parkway on Mass Ave is in East Arlington, working group, or merchants group that we meet regularly with our economic development coordinator, and that sort of turned into this BRT working group to really get feedback and build support for this project. We've had multiple forums, and I'll have one on my slide on our timeline, but there were multiple forums. We had three forums about it, there were public meetings, we had 3 surveys, and it's probably, the whole process was probably a good 7 to 8 months, getting from sort of beginning to actual pilot implementation. And we mentioned, I think we've mentioned, we do have town committees. There's a transportation advisory committee that we have that has done, that is sort of created by our select board, which is our authority that is over traffic department within the town. But they created the transportation advisory committee, which is made up of some staff, but also mostly volunteer residents, to look at sort of discrete transportation issues within the town. And they were not directly involved with this. This became really something that staff need to coordinate. I would say it's probably really difficult for a town employee that meets monthly to really take on this type of project and a number of community outreach events we needed to do. But we definitely have been informed, and there are definitely people that were on those committees that came to our forums and heard about it and made comments. But our timeline, so again, this was in 2018. April to June, doing fieldwork, data collection, stakeholder meetings. We had a BRT educational forum on May 16th. We had an alternative scenarios, forums of really different scenarios for the bus lane and for different other elements of BRT. So we had an alternative scenarios forum in August, and the actually, let's see. So and then we got a final forum after we actually did the pilot itself. The pilot itself took place from October 9th to November 9th. And then pilot evaluation occurred after that, again with help from the Bar Foundation using a consultant that they have, Stantec, in order to do the analysis of the bus data that was created that we received through the MBTA. And so what did we actually do? We, again, between Lake Street and Ellenwood Parkway, there were different elements that were tested or that were included. So at Mass Ave and Lake Street, we moved the bus stop from one side of the intersection to the other. We installed something called transit signal priority into the traffic signal that was there that allows the bus, once it gets close to that signal, as opposed to a signal, there's like a transponder in the bus that sends a signal to the traffic signal that if the light is green, will extend that green so that the bus can get through the intersection before it turns around. There's a queue jump. We have a right turn lane there, going eastbound, and there's a queue jump lane. You can go into that lane and then go across the intersection to that relocated bus stop. And actually after the pilot, all those features remained. We did not take them out or move them back again. Same thing at West Side and West Parkway, where we changed the lane assignment in the eastbound direction. The traffic signals were changed to a different phasing, which is something we had to work with Cambridge on, and they made those changes. And they made a queue jump for buses and bicycles in the right turn lane so that the 77 in particular could continue on straight from the right turn lane instead of staying in the through lane with the rest of the traffic. But in the middle here is where one of the biggest changes or the biggest things that took a while to get through was this dedicated bus lane that is in the parking lane. And we put in the parking lane from 6 to 9 a.m. So it's a time limited, put in the parking lane, we put in traffic cones, we put on temporary signage in order to do that. We have police enforcement to keep people from parking or driving there during that time frame. And they're also operated as a bus lane bike lane. There's actually a bike lane you can see in this picture where they're picking up the cones. So there's a massive redesign project that was completed a few years ago. It put in 2 lanes of traffic on eastbound, 1 lane going westbound, and then 2 bus lanes, one on each side. And so here's the pictures of how we actually did it. Again, this is the bus. That is the bus stop at the new bus stop. It was originally on the other side of Lake Street on Mass Ave. And we moved it for this pilot, but also where it was before was in a right turn lane. It was sort of in a conflict area where people would often park, or there would just be, we were trying to improve bus traffic and bus travel here, and bus experiences. So putting it on the other side of the intersection, and we had to take away 3 parking spaces to do this. But that actually made us go 1 minute faster than the morning rush hour. And I'll talk about the data in a couple minutes. But this is the dedicated bus lane area. So it operated, this is an interesting picture on the left. It operated as a bus lane and a bike lane. So we had buses and bikes sort of mixing in there. But you can see where there's a bus, there's something like a bike, and then there's the traffic that backs up for a very long way. The whole length of the bus was about a quarter mile total. But that was actually, it's very significant. It made a significant improvement, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then at Malden Parkway, you can see where the traffic just goes back for, again, a quarter mile or so, just trying to get through the light cycle to get across Malden Parkway, to turn on the Malden Parkway, to go towards Airlife. And this is what the bus will be waiting in to get through to get to the harbor or to get to Airlife Station. And so the results of this were really amazing, better than we ever expected. Quite honestly, Stantec analyzed the data for before, during, and after. And they found that basically buses ran 5 minutes faster on average. It made a huge difference. And it sort of depended on which hour. Some of the 7 to 8 and 8 to 9 a.m. hours were the most significant. But you can see in sort of the 8 to 9 a.m. for the 77 was in 5 minutes. And for some of the 79 and 350 was even more in some cases, where it was like 10 minutes difference in travel time. They increased, 41% faster during the 7 to 8 and 53% faster during the 8 to 9. So really amazing results from this. The 79 350 also were very positively impacted. And then one of the more impressive pieces of it is that not only did the bus go faster through that area, through that corridor, but it also ran consistently faster and reliability increased, meaning that the variability between sort of the average time you have to wait and
long as you used to. So in the travel time in the corridor before the pilot was 11 to 17 minutes, during the pilot it was 5 to 7 minutes. So a huge improvement. Again, we conducted 3 different surveys. Almost 1,000 people were surveyed through this process. We did a before survey. We did a before survey for everyone, during survey for bus riders specifically, and then an after survey for everyone. And on the final survey, we had almost 400 responses. Fairly a really good mix of people who said they principally drive on Mass bus riders, cyclists, and walkers. And over 2/3 of the people were satisfied or very satisfied with the pilot experience, which was excellent results. And almost 3/4 of them said that they thought the bus lane should remain. As I mentioned, for all of the elements at the 2 intersections, that Lake Street and Mass and the Parkway and Mass stayed after the pilot was done. But the bus lane, we took that one out. We didn't feel like we could sort of politically couldn't leave that one there. And we also didn't necessarily have a plan for kind of keeping that there. Whereas the other things, with the signal changes, a lot of those changes that were made were sort of harder to take back, quite frankly. And then actually 58% who said they wanted to remain said that it should be longer, that it should actually go to Main Street. And that's, we're not proposing that, but I'll go up to the next slide. So again, this is what we are proposing. I actually went to our select board last month, they approved this unanimously, was to put the bus lane back where it was, which was between Varna Street and the Electric Parkway for the 6 to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday period for that prime commute time. In the infrastructure, we had a lot of, so we did the traffic cones. We put on traffic cones down the line to prevent people from, or to indicate people not to go into the parking lane during that time. We're not planning on doing that. That's actually pretty expensive to do month over month. So we're going to have infrastructure that is essentially signs and pavement markings. There's examples around the region, certainly. There's examples in other countries and other cities in the United States, but around the region using the pavement markings and the different signage. We're not really breaking the ground on this, but it's breaking the ground for Arlington. On the enforcement side, we had a lot of enforcement during the pilot. We had 7 officers at one point, which we brought down to 2 officers that were basically detail officers for that specific location. And we were negotiating with the police department to have 1 traffic officer dedicated to parking for the first 30 days that we would have it. And then the second officer decides who will not be sort of dedicated specifically to that, but will be in the area. And then for snow clearance, really just clearing the snow as you would any other time when you're clearing the parking lane. There isn't, even if snow was blocking that and the bus had to travel on a regular travel lane, it would only be for a short time. It would not be for the entire year or for 6 months. But it would work most of the time, which is important. So just a couple more slides. What we learned is, we're planning on, it's actually on the next slide, we're planning on implementing in the next few months. And what we really learned from this process is that the dedicated lane for street function for really everybody, but of course, particularly for bus riders and cyclists. We found that cyclists that use the lane very often, they use the entire lane, which is a few hours so. They had very few or really no conflicts with buses, and bus drivers didn't have conflicts with the cyclists either. So it was very exciting to learn that. But if you think about it, during this lane, there were only about 10 buses an hour during the peak hour time. So every 10 minutes you have a bus, we have people that cycle and they're doing that. The bus bunching, it is still an issue. And something that, again, that sort of goes back between what the MBTA can do and what the cities or towns can do. But we can actually mitigate some of that through these bus
do short ones like this and improve that reliability, you know, in this particular context, the congestion is so bad that putting in a bus lane, instead of having to wait 5 minutes, you just run the bus right through there. You really need to get interdepartmental buy-in and support early on. Again, the Department of Planning and Community Development spearheaded this project for the town, but it was at times a challenge for the police and Department of Public Works was on board. Because again, this isn't something we've never done before, so there was definitely a mental block about actually doing it. And when you think about it, we didn't actually do that much. You know, in the end of the bus lane, we put down cones, we put up some temporary signage, and we had police officers. And that's it, right? But that took 8 to 9 months of planning in order to actually get it. But I think, you know, the next time it'll be easier. But these are the kind of things that once you start doing them, you're comfortable, you say, okay, we could do that. That's, you know, we've seen it before. It's not that bad. It really had no impact on the traffic conditions. It was, you know, it wasn't that, nothing really changed very much. The first week it was a little bit rough, but after that people kind of got used to it. And then where the bus lane was, we did VHB, or NAPC actually helped us do a parking study to determine where the bus lane, where we had traveling, actually didn't have very low utilization between 6 to 9 a.m. and many of the businesses opened at 9 anyway, so there wasn't much parking going on there to begin with. So that was sort of a fortunate finding that made this project really possible. So the next steps for us, we're going to install this permanent bus lane, 6 to 9 a.m. weekdays in the same place. Again, trying to keep it simple so that we're not, if we were to try to extend it, that would probably be another public process in order to get there. We really want to put this permanently on the ground as soon as possible, which we hope to be in the next 3 to 4 months. And part of funding this is that there's TNC's transportation companies, which is basically Uber and Lyft. There is money that we get from, there's a surcharge that you pay if you take an Uber, and that money goes to the state and it comes back to the community where that surcharge occurred. We get about $25,000, which isn't much, but we're going to try to stretch that as much as possible in order to get this done. Thank you very much.
Malden, we got $90,000. We have so many Uber and Lyfts going, we get a good chunk of money, I think, because we have the T station, so we get some great benefit there. So great. I think we're going to hold any questions for Dan until the end, because I want to get Rick Zamore up here. So if Dan knew to be able to interact with him. Sure. Okay. So why don't we have Rick come up here?
My name is Rick Zamore. I'm a Somerville citizen and accidental activist. So I've been a community activist, grassroots, for about 20 years, mostly with 2 groups. The first one was the Task Force, which focused on Assembly Square at a time when conventional retail was collapsing, and the ideas for its future among those who controlled Assembly Square were mostly to pave all of it and put it in big boxes in hopes that that would work a little better than the mall that failed. And how many people have been to Assembly Square? Okay, well, it's on the orange line. You guys are so lucky to have the orange line. That's really the spine, the transit spine in Boston. Everything else next to it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Missing Task Force and the fight to get the Green Line built. It's a little more than half built now. It's supposed to open in 2021, and we're about to have our key bridges destroyed. In fact, the bridge on Broadway that goes into Ball Square is going to be completely taken down Friday and Saturday night, and it will be out for a year. So that will be interesting for the buses and all of the rest of us. And then I'm going to talk a of our activism and our concern for initially people who live next to highways and have pretty serious health effects from that. And in that research, we've actually done some work in Malden. So we used Malden as a background community. The year that we were studying Chinatown, Boston as a foreground community, we used Malden because you got cleaner air. So that's a good thing for you. And then I thought I might end by talking a little bit about the future and what we might all focus on, in my mind, for the next big transit efforts here, and specifically the urban link. I'd like to bring that up. So before I start going through those groups, I'm happy to have you guys ask questions at any time. Just raise your hand or interrupt and we can chat about things. And I also, Jackie made me think about two things. She mentioned that most of the roads were not federal or state, but I just wanted you to know, and you probably assume this from your sense, that an overwhelming amount of the traffic is on the interstate and arterial highway. So it's kind of the reverse of road mileage, where the traffic actually is. And there was one other thing she made me think of. The money. So the question came up about the T and the fare increases on the T. And I just wanted to put two thoughts in your minds about that. We ran over about $17 billion on the big costs. The federal government stopped at $7 billion. And at that time, we were spending about $1 billion a year in total capital in the whole state. So about $1 billion for roads, transit, schools, prisons, water and sewer. And we basically consumed 17 years of total capital that everybody had to pitch into equally. So that put a big vacuum in the funds available for all forms of transportation and other things, but especially for transit. And we also have a much lower fuel tax than most of the states with whom we compete. So Pennsylvania went to almost $1 and in state fuel taxes quite a few years ago. Connecticut's got more fuel taxes. New York has more fuel taxes. California, Washington State. All the states that have kind of science-based and tech-based economies with whom we compete have much more funding from their fuel taxes than we do. So between losing 17 years of transportation and capital spending to the big dig and then having a much lower base of fuel tax, it's no wonder that the state is really trying to stretch the transportation dollars, perhaps too much at times. So, Mississippi Task Force, I hope it's okay to talk about this because Assembly Square and all of these things are kind of an effort to connect the land use, what our buildings and open space and green space are, the surface transportation, so what our roads and transit and biking and walking are, environment and health. And I kind of view those as one thing that's just braided together. So at Assembly Square, that was kind of a spontaneous thing that combusted in Somerville. A local planner named Tate had been talking at the State House about sustainable development and planning. And Senator Jalen asked her to speak in Somerville. And there were probably 100 people at that meeting. And she was 9 months pregnant. And her first baby was 2 weeks away. And people got inspired by the talk and just hung around after that meeting and just chatted about, well, what can normal citizens do to help Somerville? What really needs to be done? And so we started meeting, just a small group, anybody who wanted to, and we quickly thought about Assembly Square because it was mostly vacant. It's about 3 times the size of the Boston Financial District. It's 150 acres. The financial district's only about 50 acres. And we had the Orange Line running through it. It was on all these highways, so we had a lot of infrastructure. Many people in Somerville didn't know the Mystic River was in Somerville anywhere. And so we thought, well, that's really something that's underutilized that we could do better for the community. So we met for the better part of a year, and we had some designers do all sorts of alternate visions, and we started to analyze the city budget. We looked at transportation regionally, what assets were available to us, like roads and transit, and we knew, because we were a small group, we didn't want to speak for the community. We wanted to have everybody who wanted to participate. So we had what we called the Last Frontier charrette, just shy of 20 years ago at Assembly Square in Good Times Billiards, which was kind of an odd place. There were a lot of children's birthday parties. They had 7 bars there, go-karts, batting cages. But we did it in the daytime. It wasn't too loud. And we had all these plans that we had worked on that we showed people, and we alternated presentations on things like alternate design, or what are the city's finances, and where is that going, and what about the fact that we have all these residents and hardly any jobs for commercial tax base, and what about the fact that we have the greatest shortage of open space per 1,000 people. And then we had lots of alternate ways you could go. Big box, world being big box, retail, mixed use, just slather the site with triple deckers like the rest of Somerville. What if we just gave it all to restoration along the river? And we alternated presentations with facilitated table exercises, so people didn't get just bored by seeing too many slides and sitting in their seats for too long. And this was all day. Not all day, but it was like 5 or 6 hours. And the best idea, I rarely get a chance to talk about this, but we had a young girl, I think she was about 10. She wanted a small live volcano in the center of the Assembly Square. That was by far the most creative idea. But at the end of the day, people kind of agreed with what the group that had been meeting had been thinking, which is we wanted a mixed use, mix of land uses. We knew retail would probably start, but we wanted to have more jobs there. We wanted mixed income housing. The region has a great shortage of especially affordable housing. We wanted some small retail and some local retail, and we wanted transit. And we wanted better walking and biking and more open space. So that was contrary to what the city's higher planner wanted, which was the planner's formal idea, which we weren't told about to the end, was to start with 100% big boxes in the parking lots. And to assume that big box owners would recognize that they put mixed use in their parking lots, they would make more money after 8 years. So the idea was the parking lots would get filled with mixed use in 8 years. And then in 20 years, they would realize they could make a lot more money by carrying themselves down and going away. And we thought, well, when are the transitions begin? But we don't really see these guys. We had the second highest grossing Home Depot in the world, and you're really sure they're going to tear themselves down and go away? I don't know. That doesn't make much sense. But so then it turned a little bit nasty, and I guess I would at this point make some suggestions for people like me who end up accidentally being community activists. And I wrote them down. Some people are, I've got a slideshow, but we decided to spare you the slideshows for the rest of the evening. Executive decision. So some people think that a small group should lay down an agenda and have everybody repeat that mantra. And I really didn't know when I started, but I learned really quickly that if you put out 5 or 6 things that people could be interested in and run with, they will gravitate to the things that they're really interested in, and they will run with them. And they will do much better at that than you could do by telling them what to say, or what placards to hold up. They're all printed and they're all the same. And some people say small things, some people say big, complicated things, but the mix of genuineness that you get from encouraging people to participate and say what they really feel should be done to improve the community, I think is just spectacularly powerful. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. We also, since we're all grassroots, nobody has any salary in these grassroots groups. We encourage people, if they have to spend time away from activism for family or work or other reasons, yeah, go do that. We'll welcome you back with open arms when you have some time to come back. We're not going to force people to spend their time doing things when they're pinched in a particular part of their life. A few of the other things, let's see. Progress is long-term. Don't plan on getting up in a public meeting in front of officials saying something brilliant and it starts to happen the next week. It usually doesn't work that way. It usually takes a lot of persistence to get things that you really want to get done. Because the status quo kind of has inertia that you have to overcome. And let's see, what else? Be open to learning. No matter how much you think you know about things, if you actually have time to listen to other people from time to time in this process, you learn some things. It's hard for me to accept I didn't know everything at the beginning, but anyway, I continue to learn even though I'm old. So, let me just talk specifically about each of those areas, and again, I'm happy to questions at any time. So, Missing Fee Task Force, I've told you what we wanted. We ran into both pretty consolidated opposition on the part of the developers, who I think were kind of driving the city reaction. And I think of the triangle, I don't know if that triangle was put up, the power triangle food, but I think of that triangle as government, developers, and community. And it's easy sometimes for the government and the developers who have focused resources to forget to fully incorporate the community. So you need to make sure that you keep your equal place. We were fortunate that a lot of the approvals were contrary to state zoning law and also contrary to the state Chapter 91 waterways law. So we actually got involved in litigation, and I would never advise litigation if you can get something done any other way. But the zoning law is pretty simple in Massachusetts, and clear violations are cured by the state court system. And the Chapter 91, which only applies near the water, may not apply for you, is very complicated. It's very hard to write those lawsuits. We wrote almost all of the lawsuits ourselves without lawyers. We had to hire some small lawyers to prosecute those, so we ended up taking on 3 or 4 multi-billion-dollar development entities, the City of Somerville, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the 5 largest law firms in Boston, 3 fully prosecuted cases, 3 different points of law, 3 different court systems, and we're fortunate to have outright victories in all 3. Now here's a really important lesson. When you're fighting, don't make it personal, because you're going to need to work with people with whom you have disputes in the future. So it's okay to do what you need to do to push ahead, but remember that you're probably going to work with those same people if you can in the future. And so we try to never ever make it personal, no matter how upset we might be with a temporary decision by the city or by some developers. And we, because of those legal victories, now the Green Line, there's no lawsuits, so I'm going to talk about that next. Well, not really lawsuits, but there was some law. We actually won the last 2 of these lawsuits after the major developer had gone ahead and legally redeveloped the mall at Center Square and illegally tenanted it, as it turned out. I was pretty cocky, so they had hundreds of millions of dollars of obligations to those tenants, and if we'd asked the judge to toss the tenants out, they would have been in big financial trouble. So that gave us leverage to go back, which we've done many times, and ask them if they wouldn't want to have a facilitated agreement on a common vision that we could all get behind, that the developers could come out ahead with, and that the community could come out ahead with, and that we could push together. So with the help of Doug Foy, who's quite a powerful personality, and Tate, who got asked to work with him. We set aside 6 months and just worked on that. No government, but with the mayor's permission, with Mayor Curatone's blessing, just the community and the large multi-billion-dollar developers. And we crafted a common vision that allowed them to build some of the things that they wanted to do quickly, that included them giving $15 million to the Orange Line station at Assembly Square. That station was built with not $1 of MBTA money. It's the first subway stop built in 33 years. There was no investment by the transit system of Massachusetts. We got open space on the river. We got some really nice pedestrian and bike paths. And we got a pledge to cap the retail and a pledge to cap the traffic on site, and to go toward mixed use for the build out. So it's certainly not perfect, but it's evolving in the direction that we want it to. Now the Green Line was a long-term obligation of the state, and it was a Clean Air Act obligation. So there are two things that drive federal transportation conformity, which every state and region has to pay attention to. One is compliance with the Clean Air Act, and one is compliance with the federal funding bills for transportation. It happened about every 5 years. So the state started to walk on the Green Line, and we had to dig into how the federal transportation conformity regulations work, and then we met frequently and wrote US EPA and US DOT, the state, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which does the planning for all of us. And lo and behold, the region and the state were put on federal probation. So the state, they're on probation for 2.5 years, and they hadn't put the Green Line back. But we asked the secretary of LEC if he didn't think it would be a good idea to put the Green Line back in, because the state was about to lose $1 billion cash a year. The federal money would have been cut off if they had not put the Green Line back in.
He went to go get you water, just so you know.
Oh, good, thank you. Sorry. I should have brought it. I had some water, but I drank it. So it's bare bones, but we're glad to have the project. We actually have the most people per square mile, and the most highway pollution per square mile, and the most diesel rail per square mile pollution in the state. And that's where the public health came in. So by mining the state's public health data, we were able to show, the state has quite a good public health data, which they no longer keep up. That was spectacular back then. We're able to show that of the 101 cities and towns in our region, 14 had 75% of the excess heart attack and lung cancer deaths. 12 of them were contiguous, and on the map, they were the regional transportation system. So that's not fundamental environmental health research from scratch, but it was pretty compelling. And so we're able to bring that up in hearings, and everybody picked up on it. When we're going to the Green Line hearings, everybody was in it together. City government, citizens, advocacy groups, and we had to put 1,500 people in 3 hearings. The last hearing was the day the Red Sox won the first World Series in 86 years, and nobody stayed home to watch it. They all came out to the last hearing. And the secretary, who at that point was Dan Grabowskis, told me just in front of the meeting as he's looking at the crowd, well, I can't announce anything, but I think you're going to be happy with the decision. Now, along with the Green Line, we of course wanted to start to complete the regional bike path network. So one of the last additions to the Green Line project, notwithstanding the severe budget cutting, was completion of the Minuteman path to Boston as part of the project. So that off-road path is much better for bicyclists who aren't confident, for joggers, for walkers, for people with baby carriages. And we're really pleased about that, and we do expect that Northern Strand will come across the Mystic and connect into that, and that the Grand Junction will come across up through Cambridge, and all of those will meet. So we'll start to have a phenomenal regional bike and walking path. In Somerville, the community path, which was not wanted by all residents when it was started. They were afraid there would be crime, and people would be coming in from cities far away and stealing things and running back to their homes. And the opposite happened, of course. I mean, now many people who live along the path try to front the faces of their houses or their porches or their windows looking onto the path. It's not only a great calm place for people to walk and bike or cross-country ski or whatever, but it's also green. We've got trees that have grown up around it, and it's a spectacular green corridor. And it's costless, and people are getting healthier as they walk and bike. So that has been a tremendous thing for us. Because of our realization in the Green Life Fight that there were serious public health issues, we started some pretty serious, I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. We started some pretty serious environmental health research with the research universities, which Boston has many of. And so we've had doctorates from Harvard, from BU, from Tufts, and we have mobile labs and all sorts of air pollution equipment that we've actually taken here as part of our research 5 years ago. And we're the first research group in the world. It's pretty hard research. You have to be able to predict the exposure of every person in the study for every hour of a continuous year with your models. So we're the first researcher in the group to statistically significantly tie biomarkers of cardiovascular risk to highway pollution, namely different particles. Now, the one thing I wanted to throw out at the end as food for thought, that research is continuing, and I'll let it sit there. If you look at where our research economy is, it's really in Kendall Square, and it's not very easy for most parts of the region to get there or to benefit from that. The red line is great, not everybody's connected to it. The MIT and the private real estate developers are about to double the scale of Kendall Square. You can barely get through there at rush hour now. Notwithstanding Cambridge's really great efforts. Harvard is building its research campus across the river on the edge of the BU in Harvard-Alston. Like everybody else, they want to connect to Kendall. A lot of the institutes in Kendall are joining Harvard and MIT. Worcester wants to connect to Kendall. Lynn wants to connect to Kendall. Everybody wants to connect to Kendall. But we really need to spread the economy out. And with a lousy transit system, and with many of the new jobs just concentrated in Boston and specifically Cambridge, which have a shortage of housing for 800,000 people. Boston and Cambridge are short housing for 800,000 people, and the transit system is not good enough to get those people out further quickly so that they can spread out, and to also ship out the evolutionary jobs, the things that are not revolutionary and don't have to be 3 minutes from a classroom. They should be in the gateway cities. They should be shared. I don't know if you've looked at the federal opportunity zones. Most of them are around the Lower West, whether it's in Everett, in Chelsea, in Somerville, in Charlestown. Of course, Lynn is hoping to tie into the regional economy as well. We do not have the transit capacity to do that. So I would like to suggest that some people think about resurrecting the Phase 3 urban ring, which was to have been light rail all the way around, including connecting those things that I just mentioned, but coming across the river from Assembly Square, next to the Encore Casino perhaps, being within a stop on the orange line of Malden, and getting around to Chelsea, and in the other direction, hooking Kendall to Harvard-Alston and Longwood Medical. And there is a wrinkle. So that project, which now is buses, when phase 3 was expected to be able to carry 250,000 people a day with no pollution, largely in existing rail corridors like the Grand Junction. And it would intersect every highway, radial highway, so we could ship, you could have efficient connections to gateway cities in all directions that are really suffering from lack of economy. There is also a wrinkle. There was a proposal a couple years ago from Wentworth that the blue line take over the one branch of the green line that goes to Malden. So if you wanted to, you could do blue line all the way around. You could come on the north side of the Mystic, cross somewhere near Assembly and Sullivan Square, go through Kendall, go over to Harvard Alston, go through Longwood, come right back through the center of Boston. The blue line has the benefit of already having a harbor crossing. So that would not need to be new, unlike the older proposal. So you would get downtown, you would get to all the research nodes, research economy nodes here, and you would spread that benefit around. You would save sustainability of the peninsula that includes Somerville, Cambridge, and Charlestown, but you would also have great landing spots on either side in Alston and Everett. So I'll stop there if there's questions. Sorry you didn't get all the pictures and the numbers. Some of you guys may be number crunchers who don't want to talk a lot of numbers tonight, but another night.
All right, thank you. I would sometimes go down to Assembly Square when it was being built, like for a bike ride. I'd go down there in a bike trail, and he would be out there checking it out like in this picture. So it's just amazing the persistence of him and Ellen Reisner. And like I say, that long-term advocacy, and I think those tips he gave for advocates are really those key things: persistence, not taking things personally, and using your leverage. I mean, I think that's the type of thing that to imagine that they were able to take on these multi-million-dollar corporations, state and local government, to really achieve this vision that the community had. And I know that's one of the things I talk about. We often talk about all the hospital side of community-led, development. It's really what they ended up with the Assembly Square. So thank you so much. Thank you. I know we had one speaker from Malden left. He said he's promised to keep his speech to 5 minutes, and I know it's like this. So I appreciate everybody taking your time. I know it was kind of tough to put this on a Thursday evening. I knew it was going to be long. I know that just to get our keynote speaker here, Thursday was the day we could get her. So I know I had some broader ambitions, but I really appreciate people coming out. And we'll hear DJ, and if people want to hang out and talk a few minutes, we'll talk. There's still some cookies and stuff left. So let's get DJ.
Well, just saying that I can talk.
Okay, sure.
So my name is DJ Wilson. I've been in Malden since 1989. I work at Mass Municipal Association under a Department of Public Health grant. So I come onto the world of transportation and planning from a public health point of view. I am not schooled in transportation or planning. But here's a couple of things that while he's saying that to know. Number one, I think it was interesting that Jackie and Arlington and Everett all talked about pilot projects. So one of the things that I have seen in working in this city and in other cities is that it's very common for someone to have a problem, we want to fix an intersection, then someone says, let's do a study, and then someone says, yeah, but we can't pay for it. So then it takes years to find the money to do the year-long study. And then they have to have 500 meetings with neighbors, petitions signed, people coming back and forth, changes in City Hall happen during this time. And so I do respect and celebrate the idea of pilot programs. Not everything needs to go through that tedious process, but there may be some pilot ideas to do. Quickly, downtown Fitchburg tried out changing their traffic patterns. Downtown Maynard put down temporary tape for bike paths. And so these things can happen, and it doesn't need to be so tedious because it's really hard to do. Second thing to note, and I brought this up at some other places, Malden right now has about 2,000 or 3,000 people more living in the city than it did in the 1950 U.S. Census. So when people talk about there's too many people in Malden, it's not too many people. It's a lot more housing units and a ton more vehicles. That's the problem. We actually have a pretty constant population over the last 60 years. So that's just something to keep in mind. Thank you. So a lot of these things people talked about earlier, but I'll give you some details. Mass in Motion is a statewide program put on by the Department of Public Health. All the surrounding cities have it, and the two broad goals are to improve nutrition and increase physical activity. We're here to talk about physical activity, and the broad aim is to make biking and walking an easy choice. We do have Chris Murphy is the coordinator of the Malden program at the YWCA. It's called Malden is Moving, and that's their website if you want to go on and see what they do. So the impediments I see to biking and walking that we see not only in Malden but in all other cities and towns. Sidewalk maintenance is difficult, keeping it ADA compliant, and tree routes, bicycling happening on the streets with traffic, and sometimes bicycling happening on sidewalks. So there's always this problem as to where they should be. Clear crosswalk markings and working walk buttons. And we do, I've talked about this endlessly, but we have about a dozen crosswalks in Malden that have the all-stop yellow, red, the lights go yellow, red. A lot of people, not only in New England don't know what that is, but a lot of our international residents don't know what that is. Car speeds, cities and towns now can make the option to lower their maximum townwide or citywide speed to 25 miles an hour. Snow and ice continue to be a problem. Adequate lighting, as discussed earlier, and destinations, which is actually not a Malden problem, really. But most of the state, I grew up in Marlboro in a subdivision. There was no destination to go to. My parents never went for a walk because there was nowhere to go. In Malden, we are lucky that we can walk and go have dinner. You can walk and do an errand. You can walk and go to a convenience store. Or just a random walk, and actually there's a lot to see. So that's one of the benefits of here in Malden. Complete streets was mentioned earlier by the senator. This is the aim here is that when you're putting in new roads, which is not something that's going to happen in Malden, but when you're fixing roads, you step back and think about how does it affect not only cars, but how does it affect public transportation, biking, and walking, and then put the intersection back, not in the same bad way it was, but to improve it along the way. So this was an idea, this is a theory nationwide. Some cities and towns were doing it, and then all of a sudden DOT, Mass Department of Transportation, decided to fund it, so all of a sudden cities and towns cared. So Malden has enacted that policy. We have 195 cities and towns, and out of 50, we want to have done so. And we have received our first bucket of $400,000 to do projects off of the 5-year prioritization plan. These are the 3 projects we're currently working on. Charles and Maine at the Duwop Diner. It is to fix that crossing, how to get across on the bike path, and how to just make that really wide road easier for pedestrians and bicyclists. Salem Ferry in Maine. An intersection that has a ton of kids using it at the high school and the teen admission center. And lastly, Charles Street Corridor. So these 3 things, number 1 is underway, and the other 2 will be happening in the spring. Complete Streets program does let Malden go back, once these are done, to go back and ask for another $400,000. You may think $400,000 sounds like, woo, big money, why am I solving all? These are actually just to fix really small things like these. It's amazing how expensive infrastructure can cost. Malden has had a walkability, Malden Mayor's Advisory Committee for Walkability since 2012, and I've been on it, I think, from the beginning. We did recently put a mission statement, recognize walking as a legitimate means of transportation, promote walking for better physical and mental health. It builds communities, supports businesses, and reduces traffic and air pollution. So that's our broad goal, and we just recently, we have 12 new members, and so that's fantastic. We are doing our second 5-year written report right now, and one of the things that is actively happening right now is the Artland Project. But with 12 new members, we will be looking at new efforts that we can do in the city of Malden to improve walkability. Walkability. I was going to say bikeability, it's just walking. So other local efforts that are happening, Malden did update its snow removal ordinance a year ago. So This is a bumpy business, but we have 102 cities and towns that have done the same thing, and all of them have enforcement issues, but it gets there. At least it educates the population to know that you have to take care of your sidewalks. See Click Fix, which is a smartphone program to report problems to the city, and it allows the city to have an efficient way of getting out to fix the problem and to actually let you know in an email response that it was fixed. Bike share programs, we talked about Line Bike earlier. E-scooters and e-bikes are an issue for cities and towns in Massachusetts and nationwide. I actually tried an e-scooter in Denver. In Denver, they're required to be on the sidewalk. Isn't that weird? And in a lot of other places, they're required to be on the street. And one of the problems that's happening with these companies is that they sometimes come into a city, Cambridge and Boston notably, without telling anybody at City Hall that they showed up, and then they're all over the place. And in both instances, the city took them out and impounded them until the companies finally talked. So this is something we can figure out as a challenge or a good thing. T-stations, we now have bike storage cages at both of our T-stations, and we now have a bike walk path that obviously is an alternative for residents to get at least away from some of the traffic. And that's all I have to say.
So how are people's energy right now? I know, one of the hopes was really to talk a little bit about, it's about 10 to 9 right now. Do people have 10 minutes to offer their suggestions on what we can do to create a cycle of change for sustainable transportation in Malden? We know what we could do. We could take this conversation into the other room. There's still some cookies left. We can just talk around the board, and so we can, why don't we do that? Everybody get up. We're going to finish the cookies. Thanks for everybody.